Temperance Ashford had learned to make herself small. It wasn't something she'd consciously decided, but rather a survival mechanism that had developed over the 6 weeks since her family moved from Portland to this sprawling suburb outside Dallas. Small meant invisible. Invisible meant safe. At least, that's what she told herself every morning as she navigated the crowded hallways of Roosevelt High School, keeping her eyes down and her dark brown hair falling forward like a curtain between herself and the rest of the world. The school was massive. Over 2,000 students sprawled across a campus that felt more like a small college than a high school. The main building was all red brick and tall windows, 3 stories of classrooms and lockers, and endless hallways that still confused her even after 6 weeks. The cafeteria could seat 500 students at once, a cavernous space that echoed with hundreds of conversations she wasn't part of. The gymnasium gleamed with polished floors and championship banners hanging from the rafters, monuments to a school pride she didn't share. The parking lot stretched for what seemed like acres, filled with cars she could never afford, driven by students who belonged here in ways she never would. Temperance was 17, but looked younger, barely 5'3", thin in a way that suggested she forgot to eat rather than chose not to, with sharp collarbones visible above the neckline of her oversized flannel shirt. Her face was delicate, almost elfin, with large hazel eyes that seemed too big for her features, and a dusting of freckles across her nose that she hated because they made her look even younger than she was. She dressed in layers even in the Texas heat, flannels over band t-shirts, jeans that were slightly too loose, scuffed Converse that had seen better days. Everything about her appearance screamed, "Don't look at me," which was exactly the point. Her older brother Garrett would have called it camouflage if he knew, but she hadn't told Garrett about the trouble at school, and she wasn't planning to. Garrett was 26, a Dallas police officer who'd gotten his badge 4 years ago and took his responsibilities seriously. Maybe too seriously. He'd moved to Dallas first, established himself on the force, and then convinced their parents to relocate so the family could be together again. Their parents had been hesitant, but ultimately agreed, thinking it would be good for Temperance to finish her last year and a half of high school near Garrett's stabilizing influence. What none of them had anticipated was how difficult it would be for Temperance to start over in a new place, where everyone else had known each other since elementary school, where social hierarchies were already firmly established, where being the new girl made her an automatic outsider. The trouble had started small. It always did. The first week, Temperance had accidentally sat at a table in the cafeteria that apparently belonged to a group of girls who ran the school's social scene. She hadn't known. There were no assigned seats, no signs, nothing to indicate that this particular spot was claimed territory. She'd just been looking for somewhere quiet near the windows where she could eat her lunch and read without being bothered. "That's our table." The voice had been cold, cutting through Temperance's concentration on her book. She'd looked up to find 4 girls standing over her, led by a tall blonde with the kind of effortless beauty that came from good genes and expensive skincare. The girl's name was Madison Pierce, though Temperance wouldn't learn that until later. Madison stood with the casual confidence of someone who'd never been told no in her life, wearing designer jeans and a crop top that probably cost more than Temperance's entire wardrobe. Her 3 companions flanked her like an honor guard, 2 brunettes and a redhead, all equally polished, all looking at Temperance like she was something unpleasant they'd stepped in. "I'm sorry, I didn't know," Temperance had mumbled, already gathering her things. Her hands shook slightly as she shoved her sandwich back into its paper bag, her book sliding off the table and hitting the floor with a smack that made nearby students turn to look. Her face burned as she bent to retrieve it. "New girl doesn't know the rules," one of the brunettes had said, loud enough for surrounding tables to hear. "How cute." Temperance had fled to the library, where she'd eaten the rest of her lunch in a bathroom stall, tears stinging her eyes. It was such a small thing, she told herself, just a misunderstanding. It would blow over. It didn't blow over. By the second week, Madison and her friends had apparently decided that Temperance's existence was a personal affront. They started small, shoulder checks in the hallway that sent Temperance's books scattering, whispered comments just loud enough for her to hear as she passed. Did she even look in a mirror this morning? Those clothes probably came from Goodwill. I heard she's from Portland. Explains a lot. Temperance endured it silently. She'd always been quiet, more comfortable with books than people, more at ease in her own head than in social situations. Her parents had worried about her sometimes, this dreamy daughter who seemed to live half in the real world and half in whatever story she was currently reading. But they'd also recognized it as her nature, not something to be fixed. Garrett understood it too. He'd been the same way before the military straightened him out, before the police academy taught him to project confidence and authority. The third week, things escalated. Temperance arrived at her locker one morning to find "Freak" written in permanent marker across the metal door. Her stomach dropped. She stood there frozen for a long moment, staring at the black letters, feeling the eyes of other students on her back. No one said anything. No one offered to help. They just kept walking, kept talking, kept pretending they didn't see. She tried to scrub it off in the bathroom before first period, using wet paper towels until her hands were red and cramping, but permanent marker lived up to its name. The janitor eventually removed it with some kind of chemical solvent, but not before half the school had seen it. The humiliation sat heavy in her chest, making it hard to breathe. That afternoon her phone buzzed during lunch. "Garrett, how's school going, Temp?" She stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She could tell him, she should tell him. Garrett would fix it. He'd march into that school and make it stop. But that was exactly why she couldn't tell him. She was trying to handle this herself, trying to prove she could navigate her own problems without running to her big brother every time things got difficult. Besides, Garrett had his own life, his own responsibilities. He worked long shifts, dealt with actual criminals, risked his life every day. She couldn't burden him with high school drama. "It's fine," she typed back, making friends slowly but surely. The lie tasted bitter, but she sent it anyway. The fourth week brought a new element to her daily torment: social media. Someone, Madison or one of her friends, though Temperance could never prove it, created a fake Instagram account called Roosevelt Rejects that posted unflattering photos of students who didn't fit in. Temperance was featured prominently, a photo taken from behind showing her eating alone in the library, another of her tripping on the stairs. Someone had deliberately stuck out their foot, but the angle didn't show that. A third of her in gym class looking uncomfortable in her required uniform shorts. The comments were brutal. Why does she dress like a homeless person? Someone should tell her grunge died in the 90s. I bet she smells like thrift stores and sadness. Temperance stopped checking her phone. She deleted Instagram entirely, but that didn't stop other students from showing her the posts, from laughing as they scrolled through the feed in front of her. She started taking different routes through the school, timing her movements to avoid Madison and her crew, eating lunch in bathroom stalls or her car when she could. Her parents noticed something was wrong. "You seem quieter than usual, honey," her mother said one evening over dinner. "Is everything okay at school?" "Just adjusting," Temperance said, pushing food around her plate. "It takes time." Her father frowned. "You'd tell us if something was wrong, wouldn't you?" "Of course," she lied. Garrett was harder to fool. He'd started coming over for dinner once a week, and during the 5th week he cornered her in the kitchen while she was loading the dishwasher. He'd just come off shift, still in his uniform, his police radio clipped to his belt, giving off occasional static bursts. He was tall, 6'2", with their mother's dark hair and their father's strong jaw. The uniform added to his already imposing presence, the badge on his chest catching the light. Temperance. His voice had that big brother tone that meant he wasn't messing around. Something's going on. You barely eat, you've got dark circles under your eyes, and you practically jump every time your phone buzzes. Talk to me. She kept her eyes on the dish she was rinsing. I'm fine, Garrett. Just stressed about schoolwork. Bullshit. He said it gently but firmly. I'm a cop, Temp. I'm trained to spot when people are lying, and you're terrible at it. Always have been. It's nothing you need to worry about, she said quietly. I can handle it. He was silent for a long moment, and she could feel his eyes on her, assessing. Finally, he sighed. Okay, but I'm here if you need me. You know that, right? Whatever it is, whenever you're ready to talk about it, I'm here. She'd nodded, not trusting her voice, and he'd pulled her into a hug that made her want to cry. But she didn't cry. She held it together until he left, until she was alone in her room, and then she let the tears come silently into her pillow. The 6th week, Madison's campaign intensified. Temperance's backpack was stolen from her gym locker and dumped in the trash in the girls' bathroom. Her books and papers scattered in toilet water, and worse. Someone put gum in her hair during 3rd period. She felt the pull and turned around, but couldn't identify the culprit among the sea of innocent faces. She had to cut out a chunk of hair in the bathroom, leaving an awkward short section that she tried to hide with bobby pins. The humiliations blurred together. Her lunch tray knocked from her hands in the cafeteria, sending food splattering across the floor while everyone laughed. Her gym clothes hidden, so she had to wear her regular clothes and get marked down by the teacher. Anonymous texts with cruel messages, even though she'd changed her number. Notes slipped into her locker, calling her worthless, ugly, a waste of space. Through it all, she stayed silent. She cleaned up the messes, bought new supplies, changed her clothes, ignored the texts. She made herself smaller and smaller, hoping that if she just endured long enough, they'd get bored and move on to someone else. But bullies don't get bored when you give them a satisfying reaction, and Temperance's silent suffering was apparently very satisfying. The 7th week brought an unexpected complication. Hollis Chen. Hollis was in Temperance's AP literature class, a quiet student who sat in the back and rarely spoke, but whose insights were always thoughtful when he did contribute. He was tall and lean, with black hair that fell over his eyes and an artistic sensibility that showed in the detailed sketches Temperance sometimes glimpsed in his notebook margins. He wore band t-shirts and flannel, not unlike her own wardrobe, and had an air of intentional distance from the school's social hierarchies, as if he'd consciously decided none of it mattered. They'd been paired for a project on American transcendentalism, specifically Thoreau's Walden. The teacher had assigned partners randomly, and Temperance had felt a spike of anxiety when she heard Hollis's name called with hers. Not because of anything he'd done. He'd always been polite in their limited interactions, but because being noticed by anyone felt dangerous these days. "Hey," he'd said, sliding into the desk next to hers after class. "Want to meet at the library after school tomorrow to start planning this out?" She'd almost said no, almost made an excuse, but there was something in his tone, matter of fact, no judgment, no ulterior motive she could detect, that made her nod. Okay. Tomorrow after school. The library the next day was quiet, sunlight streaming through tall windows and illuminating dust motes in the air. They'd found a table in the back corner, away from the few other students working on their own projects. Hollis pulled out a worn paperback copy of Walden, covered in sticky notes and marginalia. "I actually like Thoreau," he said, flipping through the pages. "I know that makes me weird, but there's something appealing about the whole society is bullshit, go live in the woods philosophy." Temperance had smiled despite herself. The idea is appealing. The reality of actually living like that less so. No running water, no electricity, no internet. "Internet might be worth giving up," Hollis said. "Social media especially. That stuff is toxic." She'd felt a sharp pang in her chest at that, remembering the Roosevelt Rejects account, the cruel comments, the photos taken without her knowledge or consent. Her expression must have changed because Hollis looked at her with sudden concern. "You okay?" "Fine," she said automatically. Then, because something about his presence felt safe, she added, "Just thinking about how right you are about social media." They'd worked on the project for an hour, discussing Thoreau's philosophy of simplicity and self-reliance, debating whether his retreat to Walden Pond was genuine or performative, since he still went into town regularly and had his mother do his laundry. The conversation flowed easily, and for the first time in weeks, Temperance felt like herself, like someone with thoughts and opinions worth sharing rather than just a target for cruelty. As they packed up their books, Hollis said, "This was actually fun. Most group projects suck because people don't care, but you actually know the material." "So do you," she said, slinging her backpack over one shoulder. "Your annotations are really insightful." He shrugged, looking pleased. "Want to meet again Friday? We could knock out the outline for our presentation." "Sure," she heard herself say. Walking to her car afterward, Temperance felt lighter than she had in weeks. It was a small thing, one good conversation with a classmate, but it reminded her that not everyone at Roosevelt High was terrible. There were still decent people, still possibilities for connection. That fragile hope lasted until Monday morning. She was at her locker before first period when Madison appeared, flanked as always by her crew. Temperance's stomach tightened, her fingers fumbling with her lock combination. "I saw you in the library with Hollis Chen," Madison said, her voice syrupy sweet in a way that made Temperance's skin crawl. "How cute." The reject found another reject to be friends with. "We're just working on a project," Temperance said quietly, not looking up from her locker. "Sure you are." Madison leaned against the adjacent locker, examining her perfectly manicured nails. "Does Hollis know what a loser you are? Should we tell him about the Roosevelt Rejects account? I bet he hasn't seen all your best photos yet." One of the brunettes, Temperance thought her name was Ashley, laughed. "He probably feels sorry for her, like a charity case." "Leave me alone," Temperance said, hating how her voice shook. "Or what?" Madison's voice lost its sweetness, going cold and sharp. "What are you going to do, new girl? Cry? Run away? You're pathetic. You don't belong here, and everyone knows it." Temperance grabbed her books and slammed her locker shut, turning to leave. Madison's hand shot out, gripping her arm hard enough to hurt. "We're not done talking to you. Let go of me." Temperance yanked her arm free, stumbling backward. Her books tumbled from her arms, papers scattering across the hallway floor. Students flowed around her like water around a stone, some glancing over, but most pretending not to notice. The hallway crowd was thick with witnesses, but no one intervened. No one ever did. Madison and her friends laughed, stepping over Temperance's scattered papers as they walked away. "See you around, reject," Madison called over her shoulder. Temperance knelt on the dirty floor, gathering her papers with shaking hands. A few sheets had footprints on them now from students walking past. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Not here, not where people could see. "Hey!" A hand appeared in her line of vision, holding one of her papers. She looked up to find Hollis crouching next to her, helping collect her things. His dark eyes were sympathetic but not pitying, which somehow made it worse. "I'm fine," she said automatically. "Yeah, you look it," he said dryly, stacking papers into a neat pile. "Those girls are terrible. Madison's been like that since middle school. Her dad's some big-shot lawyer, so she thinks she can get away with anything." "She can," Temperance said bitterly, accepting the papers he handed her. "No one stops her." "Someone should," Hollis said. He stood, offering her a hand up. She took it, letting him pull her to her feet. You know you could report her, right? The school has anti-bullying policies. Temperance almost laughed. The school doesn't care. They pretend they do, but they don't. Madison's family donates money. Her mom's on the PTA. Nothing would happen except it would get worse for me. Hollis frowned, clearly wanting to argue but unable to contradict the truth of her words. That's messed up. Yeah, she agreed quietly. It is. They walked to first period together, and Temperance was hyper-aware of the looks they got. The whispers, the pointed stares. She was bringing Hollis into her social pariah status just by being seen with him. She should distance herself, protect him from collateral damage. But when he sat next to her in class and made a quiet joke about their teacher's terrible toupee, she found herself smiling. And when he asked if she wanted to work on their project after school again, she said yes. Over the next 2 weeks, Hollis became a fixture in Temperance's daily life. They ate lunch together in the library, worked on their Thoreau project, and started having genuine conversations about things beyond school, their favorite books, music they liked, places they wanted to travel. Hollis shared that he was planning to study art in college, specifically illustration and graphic design. Temperance admitted she wanted to be a writer, though she'd never told anyone that before, except Garrett. You should show me something you've written sometime, Hollis said one afternoon as they sat in his car in the parking lot after school. His car was an ancient Honda Civic with a temperamental engine and a back seat full of sketchbooks and art supplies. Maybe, Temperance said, though she knew she probably wouldn't. Her writing was too personal, too revealing. But the fact that he was interested warmed something in her chest that had been cold for a long time. I'm serious, he pressed. I bet you're good. You're insightful about literature. That usually translates to decent writing. We'll see, she said, allowing herself a small smile. But Madison had noticed Temperance's budding friendship with Hollis, and she didn't like it. The bullying, which had been focused solely on Temperance, now expanded to include him. It started with social media posts on the Roosevelt Rejects account featuring both of them. Losers finding each other is so precious, accompanied by a photo of them walking to the parking lot together. Reject romance alert, with a picture taken through the library windows, showing them sitting close together while working on their project. Then the comments started appearing on Hollis's actual Instagram account. Why are you hanging out with that freak? You can do better than the new girl. Careful, loser is contagious. Hollis deleted the comments and made his account private. But Temperance saw the tension in his jaw, the way his hands clenched when he checked his phone. You don't have to hang out with me, she said one day at lunch, staring at her sandwich rather than meeting his eyes. I know it's making things difficult for you. Are you kidding? Hollis looked genuinely offended. You think I care what Madison Pierce and her clone squad think? They're terrible people. I don't want their approval. But, no buts, he interrupted firmly. You're the only person in this entire school I actually like talking to. I'm not going to let some mean girls dictate who I'm friends with. That's what they want. To isolate you, make you think you deserve to be alone. You don't. Temperance felt her throat tighten with emotion. Thank you, she managed. Don't thank me for basic human decency, Hollis said. That should be the default. Not something special, but it was special, especially in a place like Roosevelt High, where cruelty seemed to be the norm and kindness the exception. The 10th week brought escalation. Madison orchestrated a humiliation in the cafeteria that was clearly designed to embarrass both Temperance and Hollis simultaneously. They'd been eating lunch at their usual table near the windows, not Madison's territory, carefully chosen to avoid conflict, when one of Madison's friends approached. The redhead, whose name Temperance still didn't know, stood over their table with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Madison wants to apologize, she announced, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Several students turned to watch, sensing drama. She feels bad about how she's treated you, Temperance. She wants to make amends. Temperance's stomach clenched with instinctive distrust, but before she could respond, Madison herself appeared, carrying a tray with what looked like a chocolate milkshake. "I've been thinking about how I've acted," Madison said, her voice carrying across the cafeteria with practiced theatrical quality. More students were watching now, sensing something was about to happen. "And I realize I've been really mean to you, Temperance. I want to apologize properly." She extended the milkshake toward Temperance. "Peace offering." Every instinct Temperance had screamed that this was a trap, but she was frozen, hyper-aware of all the eyes on them, of Hollis tense beside her, of the weight of expectation in the air. If she refused, she'd look paranoid and petty. If she accepted, "Take it," Madison urged, shaking the cup slightly. "Come on, I'm trying to be nice here." Temperance reached for the cup, her hand trembling slightly. Her fingers closed around the cold plastic. Madison's smile widened, and then Madison's hand slipped, tipping the entire milkshake down the front of Temperance's flannel shirt and jeans. The ice-cold liquid soaked through immediately, sticky and chocolate brown, spreading across her chest and lap. The cafeteria erupted in laughter. Phones appeared, dozens of them, capturing Temperance's shock-frozen expression, the dark stains spreading across her clothes, the tears that immediately sprang to her eyes despite her desperate attempt to hold them back. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," Madison exclaimed, her voice dripping with false concern that was immediately contradicted by the malicious glee in her eyes. "That was such an accident. I'm so clumsy." Temperance stood on shaking legs, milkshake dripping onto the floor, her face burning with humiliation so intense it felt physical. The laughter continued, rippling through the cafeteria in waves. She couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't breathe. "You fucking bitch," Hollis said, standing abruptly and facing Madison with barely controlled rage. "That wasn't an accident." "Language, Hollis," Madison tutted. "I said it was an accident." "Unless you're calling me a liar?" "Yeah, I am," Hollis shot back. "You're a liar and a bully and a terrible person." Madison's expression went cold. "Careful, Chen. You don't want to make an enemy of me." "Too late," Hollis said. He turned to Temperance, his expression softening. "Come on, let's get you cleaned up." He grabbed his backpack and Temperance's, then gently took her arm and guided her toward the exit. The laughter followed them all the way out of the cafeteria, along with the bright flashes of phone cameras capturing their retreat. In the hallway, Temperance finally broke. The tears she'd been holding back spilled over, and she covered her face with her hands, not caring that they were now sticky with chocolate. Her entire body shook with the force of her crying, weeks of accumulated humiliation and hurt pouring out. Hey, it's okay," Hollis said, though his voice was tight with anger not directed at her. "She's not worth your tears." "None of them are." I can't go back in there," Temperance sobbed. "Everyone saw, everyone was laughing. It's going to be all over social media by tonight." "Fuck social media," Hollis said vehemently. "Come on. You can clean up in the bathroom, I'll wait outside." But when they reached the girls' bathroom, they found Madison's crew already there, apparently having predicted Temperance's destination. Ashley and the other brunette, Temperance thought her name might be Brittany, blocked the doorway, arms crossed. "Bathroom's closed," Ashley announced. "We're having a private conversation." "Move," Hollis said, his voice dangerous. "Or what?" Brittany challenged. "You going to hit a girl, Chen?" "That'll look good on college applications." Hollis's jaw clenched, and Temperance could see him wrestling with the impossibility of the situation. He couldn't force his way past them without physically moving them, which would get him in serious trouble. But they also couldn't just stand here in the hallway with Temperance covered in milkshake. "Let's go to the nurse's office," Temperance said quietly, tugging on Hollis's sleeve. "Please, I just want to get cleaned up." They went to the nurse's office, where the school nurse, a kind woman in her 50s named Mrs. Rodriguez, took one look at Temperance, and her expression went from surprise to sympathy to barely concealed anger. "What happened?" she asked, already moving to grab paper towels and pulling out the first aid kit, as if this were an injury that could be bandaged. "Accident in the cafeteria," Temperance said, the lie automatic. Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes flicked to Hollis, then back to Temperance. Her expression said she didn't believe the accident story for a second. "Do you have gym clothes in your locker? A change of clothes in your car?" Temperance shook her head. "I'll be fine." "You can't sit in class like that, honey. The smell alone will—" Mrs. Rodriguez trailed off diplomatically. She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling your emergency contact. You should go home and change." "No!" The word came out sharper than Temperance intended. The emergency contact would be her parents, and they'd ask questions, and she'd have to explain, and then they'd tell Garrett, and this entire situation would spiral out of her control. "I mean, it's fine. I'll wear my gym clothes. Those are in my locker." Mrs. Rodriguez looked skeptical, but nodded slowly. "All right, go get them and come back here to change. You can use the private bathroom in my office." When Temperance returned from her locker, grateful to find Madison's crew had apparently gotten bored and left the hallway, she changed into her gym clothes and stuffed her ruined outfit into a plastic bag. She looked at herself in the small mirror over the sink and barely recognized the reflection staring back. Red-rimmed eyes, splotchy face, hair disheveled, wearing ill-fitting gym shorts, and a t-shirt with the Roosevelt High logo. She looked defeated. She looked broken. She looked exactly how Madison wanted her to look. That night, the videos and photos were everywhere. Roosevelt Rejects posted a full video of the milkshake incident with the caption, "When you try to make friends but realize you're unfriendable." The comments were vicious. Someone had created a meme using a freeze frame of Temperance's shocked, tearful expression. It was being shared across multiple platforms, liked and reposted by students she'd never even met. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications despite having deleted most of her social media apps. Text messages from unknown numbers. "You looked pathetic today. Just transfer already. Nobody wants you here." She turned her phone off entirely and buried herself under her covers, wishing she could disappear. The next morning, Garrett showed up at her house before school. He was still in civilian clothes, jeans and a Dallas PD t-shirt, but his expression was already in cop mode, observant, concerned, ready to solve a problem. "Mom said you came home early yesterday," he said without preamble when Temperance opened the front door. Their parents had already left for work. "Said something happened at school." "It was nothing," Temperance said, stepping aside to let him in. "Just spilled something on myself. Had to change." Garrett's eyes narrowed. "Temperance." "I'm fine, Garrett." "You're not fine. You haven't been fine for weeks." He closed the door behind him and followed her into the kitchen where she was gathering her things for school. "I let it slide before because you asked me to, but I can't keep doing that. Something's wrong, and I need you to tell me what it is." "It's just high school stuff," she said, shoving books into her backpack with more force than necessary. "Typical mean girl drama, nothing worth worrying about." "Are you being bullied?" The question was direct, cop-like in its bluntness. Temperance's hands stilled on her backpack zipper. She could feel Garrett's eyes on her, could sense him cataloguing every micro-expression, every tell. He was trained for this, trained to read people, to spot deception, to protect and serve. "It's not a big deal," she said quietly. "That's not what I asked." His voice softened slightly. "Temp, look at me." She turned, meeting his eyes. He looked worried, the kind of worried that came from love rather than professional obligation. Her big brother who taught her to ride a bike, who'd scared off her first boyfriend when she was 14, who'd sent her care packages when he was overseas with the military. He wanted to help. He always wanted to help. "Some girls at school don't like me," she admitted. "They've been mean. But I can handle it." "How mean?" "Just typical stuff. Comments, social media posts, stupid pranks." She deliberately downplayed it, not mentioning the vandalized locker, the destroyed backpack, the public humiliations. "It'll blow over." "These things always do." Garrett looked like he wanted to argue, but he also knew his sister. Knew she was stubborn, knew she needed to fight her own battles sometimes, knew that swooping in to fix everything wouldn't help her learn to stand up for herself. "Okay," he said finally. "But if it gets worse, if they touch you, if you feel unsafe for even a second, you call me immediately. I don't care if I'm on duty. I don't care what time it is. You call me. Understand?" "I understand," she said, relieved he was letting it go for now. He pulled her into a hug, and she let herself lean into him for just a moment, drawing strength from his presence. "I'm serious, Temperature. I'm here. Always." "I know," she whispered. After he left, she stood in her kitchen and tried to convince herself that she really could handle this, that she didn't need to drag her brother into her problems, that she could be strong enough on her own. The 11th week, Madison's campaign against Temperance and Hollis intensified with creative cruelty. Someone created fake screenshots of text conversations, making it look like Temperance and Hollis were talking about other students in cruel, judgmental ways. The screenshots were obviously fabricated. The font was wrong, the formatting off, but that didn't stop them from spreading through the school like wildfire. Students who'd been neutral toward them suddenly glared in the hallways. One girl confronted Temperance at her locker, demanding to know why she'd supposedly called her a slut in texts that Temperance had never sent. "I didn't write that," Temperance said desperately. "Those texts are fake. I don't talk about people like that." "Right," the girl said sarcastically. "You're just a victim, huh? Poor little new girl. Except maybe you're just a bitch and everyone's finally figuring it out." It was a masterful move by Madison, turning potential allies against them by making Temperance and Hollis look like the bullies rather than the bullied. The social isolation intensified. Students actively avoided them in the hallways, moved away if they sat nearby in class, whispered and pointed as they passed. "This is psychological warfare," Hollis said one afternoon as they sat in his car, their refuge from the school. "She's trying to break us down." "It's working," Temperance admitted. She felt exhausted down to her bones, worn thin by the constant vigilance, the daily humiliations, the crushing weight of being universally disliked. Her grades were slipping, hard to focus on homework when your phone buzzed constantly with hate messages. Her sleep was broken by anxiety-fueled insomnia. She'd lost weight she couldn't afford to lose, her clothes hanging even looser than before. "Don't let her win," Hollis said fiercely. "That's what she wants. She wants you to break, to leave, to give her that satisfaction. Don't give it to her." "I'm tired, Hollis," Temperance said quietly. "I'm so tired." He reached over and took her hand, squeezing gently. "I know, but we're almost at winter break. Just a few more weeks, and then we get 2 weeks away from this hellhole. Can you make it a few more weeks?" She wanted to say yes, wanted to be strong, but she wasn't sure anymore. That weekend, Garrett came over for dinner again. Temperance tried to act normal, tried to smile and engage in conversation, but she could feel him watching her with increasing concern. When she excused herself early, claiming she had homework, he followed her upstairs and knocked on her door. "Can we talk?" he asked when she opened it. She stepped aside to let him in. He closed the door behind him and leaned against it, arms crossed, his cop face firmly in place. "You've lost weight," he said without preamble. "You have dark circles under your eyes. You barely touched your dinner. And you're jumpy as hell. You flinched when Dad dropped his fork. What's really going on at school?" "I told you." Don't lie to me, Temperance. His voice was sharp now. I'm not asking as your brother anymore. I'm asking as someone who cares about your well-being and can clearly see you're in distress. Is someone hurting you? Not physically, she said before she could stop herself. His expression darkened. Explain. And suddenly she was too tired to keep it all inside anymore. The words tumbled out, Madison and her friends, the escalating harassment, the social media posts, the fake texts, the daily humiliations, the isolation. She told him about the milkshake incident, about being locked out of the bathroom, about the vandalized locker and destroyed backpack. She showed him some of the text messages she'd saved, the cruel posts on Roosevelt rejects. By the time she finished, Garrett's jaw was tight with barely controlled anger, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded. "This has been going on for months, and you didn't think to mention that you're being systematically harassed and abused." "Because I wanted to handle it myself," she said, tears streaming down her face now. "Because I didn't want to be the girl who runs to her cop brother every time something bad happens. Because I thought I could be strong enough. Temperance." He pulled her into his arms, and she broke down completely, sobbing into his shoulder. "You are strong. You've been enduring hell for months without cracking, but strength also means knowing when to ask for help. This is beyond typical high school drama. This is criminal harassment. What can you even do?" she asked into his shirt. "You're not a school administrator, and Madison's family has money and influence. Nothing will change." "We'll see about that," Garrett said grimly. "First thing Monday morning, I'm going to talk to your principal." "No!" Temperance pulled back, panic surging. "That'll make it worse. If Madison finds out I told—" "She's not going to do anything," Garrett interrupted, "because she's going to face actual consequences. Trust me on this. I'm not going to let this continue." "Please," Temperance begged, "please don't make this bigger. I just need to survive until summer, and then I'm done with that school forever. I can transfer for senior year if I have to." Garrett looked torn. "You shouldn't have to transfer. You shouldn't have to be the one who leaves. But that's how it works," she said bitterly. "The bullies win. They always win." "Not this time," Garrett said, but his voice was uncertain for the first time. He clearly wanted to charge in and fix everything. But he also recognized that his sister was right. Sometimes adult intervention made things worse for the victim, not better. They compromised. Garrett would hold off on going to the school, but Temperance had to promise to call him immediately if anything else happened. She agreed, though part of her knew she probably wouldn't follow through. Calling Garrett would feel like admitting defeat, like proving she couldn't handle her own life. The 12th week brought a brief reprieve. Madison was absent from school for 3 days. Rumor had it she'd gone to a family wedding in California. Without their ringleader present, her friends lost some of their coordinated cruelty. There were still whispers and pointed looks, but no major incidents. Temperance and Hollis used the temporary peace to actually focus on finishing their Thoreau project. They spent hours in the library crafting their presentation, debating the relevance of transcendentalist philosophy in modern America, arguing about whether true self-reliance was even possible in an interconnected world. Thoreau had the luxury of choosing solitude, Temperance observed as they worked on their slides. He could go live in the woods because he had enough privilege and resources to make that choice. Most people don't. True, Hollis agreed, but the core idea still resonates, that we should think for ourselves instead of just accepting what society tells us, that we should live deliberately instead of just going through the motions. "I wonder what Thoreau would think about high school social hierarchies," Temperance mused, "about the performative nature of teenage social life. He'd probably have some thoughts about conformity and the death of individualism," Hollis said dryly, "and he'd definitely hate social media." They presented their project on a Friday, and it went well. Their teacher praised their insights and the depth of their analysis. For 45 minutes, Temperance felt like a normal student again, someone valued for her intelligence rather than mocked for her existence. That fragile normalcy shattered Monday morning when Madison returned. She came back with renewed energy and apparently had spent her time away plotting something big. Temperance could see it in the way Madison and her friends huddled together between classes, in their frequent glances toward Temperance and Hollis, in their barely contained excitement. "They're planning something," Hollis said at lunch, watching Madison's table across the cafeteria. "Something worse than usual." "I know," Temperance said, her appetite gone. "I can feel it." She wasn't wrong. The 13th week, Madison set her trap. It started with a carefully orchestrated rumor campaign, whispers that Temperance had been caught stealing from other students' lockers. The rumor was absurd and completely unfounded, but by lunchtime on Tuesday, it had spread through the entire school. Students started checking their lockers between classes, giving Temperance suspicious looks. On Wednesday, a wallet went missing from a locker near Temperance's. On Thursday, someone reported their phone stolen. On Friday, Madison's expensive designer purse mysteriously vanished from her gym locker. All evidence pointed at Temperance, or at least all the evidence Madison had carefully planted. A bracelet from the first theft was found in Temperance's backpack during gym class. The missing phone turned up in her locker, discovered when a teacher happened to be walking by, and Madison helpfully suggested checking there. "I didn't take any of this stuff," Temperance insisted to the vice principal, a stern man named Mr. Hendricks, who clearly had already made up his mind about her guilt. "I'm being set up." "That's a serious accusation," Mr. Hendricks said. "Do you have any proof that you're being framed?" "Do you have any proof that I took these things?" she shot back. "Other than them mysteriously appearing near me? Doesn't that seem suspicious?" "What seems suspicious is that multiple items have gone missing, and all of them have been found connected to you in some way," he countered. "Your locker, your backpack, your vicinity. I'm afraid we're going to have to call your parents and potentially involve the police." "My brother is the police," Temperance said, her voice shaking with anger and fear. "Call him. He'll tell you I'm not a thief." Mr. Hendricks raised an eyebrow. "Your brother being in law enforcement doesn't exempt you from consequences." But he did call Garrett, who left work immediately and arrived at the school within 20 minutes. Temperance had never been so relieved to see anyone in her life. Garrett listened to Mr. Hendricks explain the situation, his expression neutral, nodding occasionally. When the vice principal finished, Garrett turned to Temperance. "Did you take any of these items?" "No," she said firmly, meeting his eyes. "I'm being framed by Madison Pierce and her friends. This is part of their harassment campaign." "Harassment campaign?" Mr. Hendricks interjected. "This is the first I'm hearing about any harassment." "Because nobody pays attention," Temperance said, frustrated tears threatening. "I've been bullied for months. Social media posts, vandalism, public humiliation. Other students have seen it, teachers have seen it, but nobody does anything because Madison's parents donate money to the school." "That's a serious accusation," Mr. Hendricks said again, his favorite phrase apparently. "I'd like to see the evidence," Garrett said, his voice calm but with an undercurrent of authority that made Mr. Hendricks sit up straighter. "The items that were allegedly stolen, where they were found, and any security footage from the areas where the thefts occurred." "We don't have cameras in the locker areas," Mr. Hendricks admitted. "Privacy concerns." "Convenient," Garrett observed. "So you have no actual evidence of my sister stealing anything. You only have items that were found near her, items that could have been planted by anyone at any time." "The bracelet was in her backpack," Mr. Hendricks said defensively. "How would someone else put it there without her noticing?" "Her backpack sits in her gym locker during PE class," Garrett said. "A locker she shares a hallway with dozens of other students. A locker that only has a basic combination lock that any determined student could bypass. Someone could have easily put items in her bag during that time." Mr. Hendricks looked uncomfortable, but not convinced. "Even so, the circumstantial evidence isn't evidence," Garrett interrupted, his cop voice fully engaged now. "It's hearsay and planted materials. You have no proof my sister took anything. What you do have is her statement that she's being systematically harassed by a group of students. Have you investigated those claims?" "We take all bullying allegations seriously," Mr. Hendricks said, the statement clearly rehearsed. "That's not what I asked," Garrett said. "Have you investigated? Have you talked to witnesses? Looked at social media posts? Done anything besides accept the word of students who have motive to frame my sister?" The silence that followed was damning. "Mr. Hendricks clearly hadn't investigated anything." "I thought not," Garrett said. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to drop these theft accusations against my sister because you have no actual evidence. Then you're going to launch a formal investigation into the bullying she's been experiencing. If you don't, I'll be filing a formal complaint with the school board and potentially pursuing legal action for the district's failure to provide a safe learning environment." "Officer Ashford." "It's just Garrett for now," he said coldly. "But it'll be Officer Ashford, along with a lawyer, if this isn't resolved appropriately." "Do we understand each other?" Mr. Hendricks nodded reluctantly. "I'll speak to Principal Morrison about launching an investigation." "Today," Garrett pressed. "This gets addressed today. My sister has endured months of harassment. That ends now." They left the office together, and Temperance felt a complicated mix of relief and anxiety. Relief that Garrett had defended her, that the theft accusations would be dropped. Anxiety about what would happen next, about Madison's inevitable retaliation. "Thank you," she said quietly as they walked to the parking lot. "You don't thank me for doing my job," Garrett said, but his voice was gentler now. "Which is protecting you. I should have pushed harder when you first mentioned problems at school. I should have—" "You couldn't have known," Temperance interrupted. "I deliberately downplayed it. This isn't your fault." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "This Madison girl and her friends, they're escalating. First harassment, then framing you for theft. That's a pattern of behavior that suggests they're not going to stop on their own." "So, what do I do?" Temperance asked helplessly. "You document everything," Garrett said. "Screenshots, photos, witnesses, you build a case, and if they come at you again, you call me immediately. I don't care if I'm in the middle of arresting someone, you call me." Temperance nodded, but even as she agreed, she knew Madison wouldn't make it that simple. Madison was smart, calculating, cruel. She wouldn't stop just because the school was supposedly investigating. If anything, she'd be more determined than ever to make Temperance's life hell. And Temperance was right. The following Monday, Madison's purse was miraculously found in the girls' bathroom, conveniently right after school administration had announced they were investigating bullying claims. Madison tearfully apologized to Temperance in front of witnesses, saying she must have misplaced it and felt terrible for the accusation. It was a perfect public relations move that made Madison look reasonable, and Temperance looked like she'd made a big deal out of nothing. The other stolen items were also returned to their owners, with vague explanations about them being misplaced. The theft accusations evaporated like they'd never existed, but so did any serious investigation into Madison's harassment campaign. "They're sweeping it under the rug," Hollis said furiously, when Temperance told him what had happened. "Of course they are. Can't have a scandal involving a donor family's daughter." "At least the theft thing went away," Temperance said wearily. She was so tired of fighting, of hoping things would get better, only to be disappointed again and again. "That's not enough," Hollis insisted. "They need to face consequences." But there were no consequences. Madison had successfully deflected any real investigation, and school administration was clearly content to consider the matter closed. Life returned to its previous pattern of daily harassment, comments in the hallways, social media posts, isolation, and mockery. But something had shifted in Madison. The near miss with actual consequences seemed to have made her more reckless, more determined to punish Temperance for daring to push back. The harassment intensified beyond anything that had come before. Someone hacked Temperance's school email account and sent inappropriate messages to teachers from her account. Someone slashed her car tires in the school parking lot. Someone spray-painted "bitch" on her locker in red paint that looked disturbingly like blood. Each incident Temperance reported. Each time, school administration promised to investigate. Each time, nothing happened. No cameras had caught anything. No witnesses came forward. The perpetrators were never identified. Garrett was furious, making multiple trips to the school to meet with administrators, to push for action, to demand his sister be protected. But without proof, without witnesses willing to come forward, there was little he could do beyond his continued presence and advocacy. "I'm thinking about just transferring," Temperance admitted to Hollis one afternoon in late November. They were sitting in his car, their usual refuge, watching rain batter the windshield, finishing the semester somewhere else, maybe doing online school. "Don't let them win," Hollis said, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. He looked tired too, worn down by the constant battle. He'd been suffering similar harassment as Temperance's associate: slashed tires, vandalized locker, social media attacks. His parents had complained to the school multiple times with similar lack of results. "Maybe them winning is better than this," Temperance said quietly. "I can't keep living like this. I can't keep waiting for the next horrible thing to happen. It's affecting everything. My grades, my sleep, my mental health. I cry every morning before school. I have panic attacks in the bathroom. This isn't sustainable." Hollis reached over and took her hand. "I hate that they're breaking you. I hate that the system is failing us, but I also hate the idea of not seeing you every day." It was the closest he'd come to admitting that their friendship had become something more. The feelings had been growing between them for weeks. Small moments of connection, lingering looks, the comfort they found in each other's presence. But naming it felt dangerous when everything else in their lives was so unstable. "I hate that idea too," Temperance admitted softly. They sat in silence for a while, hands clasped, watching the rain. In that moment, Temperance made a decision. She wasn't going to let Madison Pierce drive her away from this school, away from Hollis, away from her life. She was going to stay. She was going to fight. She didn't know how yet, but she was done being a victim. That resolve lasted exactly 4 days. The 14th week, on a Wednesday afternoon, Madison orchestrated her most vicious attack yet. It was calculated for maximum impact, the week before Thanksgiving break, when everyone was restless and eager for drama, during a time when Temperance would be most vulnerable. It started with a text to Temperance during 7th period. "Come to the main girls' bathroom on 2nd floor. Alone. If you want the harassment to stop, we need to talk. M." Every instinct told Temperance it was a trap. She knew better than to meet Madison anywhere, especially alone. But the promise that the harassment might stop was too tempting. She was so tired, so worn down, and the thought that there might be an end to this nightmare clouded her judgment. She should have told Hollis where she was going. She should have texted Garrett. She should have brought a witness. Instead, she slipped out of study hall, using a bathroom pass, and headed to the 2nd floor bathroom. The bathroom was empty when she arrived, or so it seemed. The space was typical of Roosevelt High's architecture: white tile floors, industrial sinks, stalls with grey metal doors, fluorescent lighting that hummed overhead. The air smelled like industrial soap and something vaguely antiseptic. "Madison?" Temperance called out, her voice echoing off the tiles. No response. Maybe Madison had changed her mind. Maybe this was just another mind game, sending Temperance on a wild goose chase. She turned to leave, and that's when they struck. Madison and her three main friends, Ashley, Brittany, and the redhead whose name Temperance finally learned was Chelsea, emerged from various stalls where they'd been hiding. Before Temperance could react, they surrounded her, blocking the exit. "You really thought we wanted to make peace?" Madison laughed. "You're even dumber than I thought." "Let me leave," Temperance said, trying to keep her voice steady even as her heart hammered. This was different from their usual harassment. This felt dangerous. "We're not done with you yet," Ashley said, her voice cold. "You got your cop brother involved. You tried to get us in trouble. That was a mistake." "I didn't," Temperance started, but Brittany cut her off. "Shut up. We don't care what you have to say. You think you're so special, so much better than everyone else, walking around with your little boyfriend, acting like victims. Well, you're about to understand what it really means to be a victim." Madison stepped closer, and Temperance instinctively stepped back, finding herself pressed against the cold tile wall. "Here's how this is going to work," Madison said, her voice conversational despite the threat in her eyes. "You're going to stay here while we have a little chat about respect and knowing your place." "My brother knows I'm here," Temperance lied desperately. "If I don't text him soon—" "Oh, we're not going to hurt you," Madison interrupted with false sweetness. "Nothing like that. We're just going to have a conversation, a long conversation. You're going to miss the end of 7th period and 8th period. And when people wonder where you are, we'll make sure they know you're fine, just occupied." Understanding dawned with horror. "You're going to lock me in here." "Smart girl," Chelsea said mockingly. "Finally catching on?" "You can't," Temperance said, panic rising in her chest. The teachers don't give a shit about you." Madison said bluntly. "We've proven that over and over, and by the time anyone thinks to check this bathroom, school will be over. You'll spend the next—" she checked her phone, "2.5 hours thinking about how you don't belong here, how you never will." "Please," Temperance said, hating how her voice shook. "Don't do this." "Should have thought of that before you ran to your brother," Madison said coldly. Then to her friends, "Chelsea, get her phone." Chelsea moved fast, grabbing Temperance's backpack and yanking it off her shoulder. Temperance tried to hold on, but it was 3 against 1, and they got it away easily. Chelsea pulled out Temperance's phone and handed it to Madison, who examined it with mock interest. "No password. That's trusting." Madison opened the phone and started scrolling through it. Cute texts with Hollis. Oh, and lots of messages from Big Brother checking in. "How's school? Everything okay? Let me know if you need anything." She read the messages in a mocking voice. "He's going to be so worried when you don't respond." She dropped the phone on the tile floor, and before Temperance could move, Madison's expensive sneaker came down hard, grinding the phone under her heel. The screen cracked with a sharp sound that made Temperance flinch. Madison picked it up, examined the shattered screen, and then calmly walked to one of the toilets and dropped it in. "Oops," she said flatly. "You can't just leave me here," Temperance tried again, fighting back tears. "Someone will need to use the bathroom." "The janitor put an out-of-order sign on the door while we were waiting for you," Brittany said with a mean smile. "Good thing I'm dating him, huh?" "He'll remove it after school's over." "This is insane," Temperance said, desperation making her voice sharp. "This is illegal. This is a lesson," Madison interrupted, "about power, about where you stand in the social hierarchy, about what happens when you forget your place." She stepped even closer, so close Temperance could smell her expensive perfume. "You don't belong here, Temperance. You never did. This is our school, our territory, our rules. You're just a visitor who overstayed her welcome." "I haven't done anything to you," Temperance said, tears finally spilling over. "I just tried to exist. That's all I've ever tried to do. Your existence is the problem, Madison said coldly. You remind people that the social order can be challenged, that losers might think they can sit at our tables, date our guys, take up space that should be ours. You existing here, refusing to leave, trying to fit in, it's a threat. So you need to be reminded thoroughly and repeatedly that you don't get to just decide you belong somewhere. We decide, and we've decided you don't. With that, Madison turned and headed for the door. Her 3 friends followed, and Temperance lunged after them, but Ashley blocked her path long enough for the others to get outside. By the time Temperance reached the door, it was closed. She grabbed the handle and pulled, but it didn't budge. She could hear something being done on the other side, something being wedged under the door, some kind of mechanism to jam it shut. She pulled harder, rattling the handle, but it held firm. "Let me out!" she shouted, pounding on the door. "Please! Someone help!" But the hallway outside was empty. 7th period was still in session, and this bathroom was in a less trafficked section of the building. No one came. No one heard. Or if they did, no one cared enough to check. Temperance pulled out her phone before remembering it was destroyed, sitting in a toilet. She was trapped, completely cut off, and no one knew where she was. Panic set in fully then. The bathroom suddenly felt smaller, the fluorescent lights too bright, the tile walls closing in. She resumed pounding on the door, screaming for help until her hands hurt and her voice went hoarse. She tried throwing her weight against the door, but it was solid and industrial, designed to withstand far more force than her small frame could generate. She checked every stall looking for a window, for any way out, but there was nothing. The bathroom had been chosen deliberately. 2nd floor, interior room, no windows, out of the way. Perfect for trapping someone. The minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. She heard the bell ring for the end of 7th period, heard the rush of students in the hallways outside, their voices and laughter muffled by the door. She pounded and screamed again, but no one came to investigate. The out-of-order sign must have been doing its job. Another bell. 8th period starting. Still trapped. Still alone. Temperance slid down against the wall, pulling her knees to her chest, trying to control her breathing, panic attack threatening to overwhelm her. The bathroom felt like a tomb, cold, sterile, isolated. She thought about Hollis wondering where she was, about her teachers marking her absent, about Garrett expecting his usual, "How was school?" text that wouldn't come. She should have told someone where she was going, should have been smarter, should have known better than to trust Madison's message, but she'd been desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. The panic gave way to anger. Anger at Madison for being cruel, anger at the school for enabling her, anger at herself for being weak enough to fall into this trap, anger at a system that protected bullies and punished victims. And then the anger gave way to determination. She wasn't going to just sit here feeling sorry for herself. She was getting out, and when she did, Madison was going to face consequences. Real ones. Not empty promises from ineffectual administrators, but actual legal consequences. Temperance dug through her backpack, looking for something useful. No phone, but she had a student ID card. She went back to the door and tried to slide the card between the door and frame, hoping to dislodge whatever was jamming it shut. The card was too thick to fit in the gap properly. She tried again with a piece of paper, sliding it through and trying to push out whatever was blocking the door. She felt resistance, something definitely wedged under the door from the outside. She pushed harder, angling the paper different ways, trying to create enough force to move whatever was there. Nothing worked. She checked her backpack again. Library book, notebook, pens, calculator, half-eaten granola bar, water bottle, nothing useful for escaping a locked bathroom. More time passed. She tried the door again periodically, hoping whatever mechanism Madison had used might weaken or shift. It didn't. She tried screaming for help again when she thought she heard footsteps in the hallway, but whoever was out there didn't respond. The final bell rang. End of 8th period. End of the school day. Temperance heard the familiar rush of students heading to lockers and parking lots, heard voices and laughter and the sounds of freedom that she was denied. Heard it all gradually fade as people left the building, and then silence. The building had that particular quality of emptiness that schools get after hours, still and echoing, all the human energy drained away. Temperance was alone in a deserted building, trapped in a bathroom with no way to contact anyone. She felt tears threatening again and forced them back. Crying wouldn't help. She needed to think. Garrett would notice when she didn't come home. He'd call when she didn't answer. He'd get worried. But how long would that take? She was usually home by 4:30. It was probably around 4 now. So maybe an hour before he'd start to worry? Another hour before he'd come looking? Could she wait 2 hours in this bathroom? She could. She'd have to. But then a worse thought occurred to her. What if Garrett called the house first? Their parents wouldn't be home until 6. He might assume she was at the library or a friend's house. He might not start seriously worrying until it got late, until she missed dinner, until it got dark. She could be here for hours longer. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, harsh and unrelenting. The bathroom felt colder now, or maybe that was just her body responding to stress. She wrapped her arms around herself and tried to stay calm. Time became strange in the empty silence. She had no phone to check, no way to know how long she'd been trapped. She tried counting seconds, but her mind wandered and she lost track. It could have been 20 minutes or 2 hours. She couldn't tell. She went back to the door and tried again, pulling and pushing and rattling the handle, still firmly stuck. She examined the hinges, but they were on the outside, no way to remove them from her side. She considered trying to break down the door, but even if she had the strength, the noise would probably just echo through an empty building with no one to hear. She was well and truly trapped. Sitting back down, Temperance let herself think about what would happen after she got out, because she would get out eventually. She knew that rationally. Someone would find her, or Garrett would come looking, or she'd somehow figure out the mechanism keeping the door closed. She'd get out. And when she did, Madison was done. No more staying quiet, no more trying to handle it herself, no more protecting Bullies from consequences because she was afraid of making things worse. Garrett had been right. This was criminal harassment. This was false imprisonment. This was assault, even if they hadn't touched her. They had deliberately trapped her, isolated her, caused her severe emotional distress. She would press charges, real charges. She would make Madison and her friends face actual legal consequences. She would ensure they couldn't do this to anyone else ever again. The determination settled in her chest, giving her something to hold on to in the cold silence. But first, she had to get out. An hour passed, maybe more. The building was completely silent now, not even the distant sound of janitors or teachers staying late. Roosevelt High was empty, except for her. And then she heard it. Footsteps in the hallway outside, multiple footsteps moving with purpose, accompanied by the crackle of a radio. Second floor, checking all rooms. Roosevelt High administration confirmed a student is missing. Last seen heading toward the second floor bathrooms during 7th period. Garrett's voice. It was Garrett's voice. "Garrett!" Temperance screamed, jumping to her feet and pounding on the door with renewed strength. "Garrett! I'm in here! In the bathroom!" The footsteps stopped. A moment of silence. Then rapid movement toward her door. "Temperance!" Garrett's voice was right outside now, sharp with relief and lingering fear. "Are you hurt?" "I'm okay," she called back, her voice cracking. "The door's jammed." There's something wedged under it from the outside. She heard movement, and then Garrett's voice again, but not directed at her. "Found her! Second floor main bathroom. She's safe. Door's been barricaded. I need a wedge removed from the outside." More footsteps. Someone crouched down, and Temperance stepped back from the door. She heard scraping sounds, metal against tile, and then sudden movement as something came loose. The door opened. Garrett stood there in his police uniform, his expression cycling rapidly through relief, anger, and protective fury. Behind him were two other uniformed officers, a school administrator she didn't recognize, and the janitor looking confused and concerned. "Madison Pierce and her friends locked me in here," Temperance said immediately, before anyone could ask questions. Her voice was steady now, bolstered by righteous anger. "They took my phone and destroyed it. They planned this. The janitor," she pointed at him, "he was dating one of them, Brittany. He put up an out-of-order sign so no one would try to come in." The janitor's face went pale. "I didn't know. She said it was a prank. I didn't realize." "That's enough," one of the other officers said, cutting him off. "We'll need to take statements from everyone involved." Garrett was in front of Temperance now, hands on her shoulders, eyes scanning her face with practiced assessment. "Are you hurt? Did they touch you?" "No," she said. They trapped me. Took my phone and broke it. Threw it in the toilet." She pointed to the stall where the destroyed phone lay in the water. Garrett's jaw clenched so tightly she could see the muscles jumping. His hands on her shoulders were gentle despite the clear rage vibrating through his entire body. He pulled her into a hug, and she felt him trembling with the effort of controlling his anger. "I'm okay," she said into his chest. "Really. I'm okay." "You've been missing for almost 3 hours," he said, his voice rough. "When you didn't answer my texts. When school admin said you'd been marked absent from last period but your car was still in the lot. Temperance, I thought." He didn't finish the sentence, but she understood. He'd thought the worst. In his job, he saw the worst frequently enough that his mind would have gone to dark places immediately. "I'm sorry," she said. "They took my phone before I could call you." He pulled back, keeping his hands on her shoulders, looking at her with an intensity that was pure cop now. "Tell me everything. From the beginning. Every detail." So she did. Standing there in that cold bathroom with the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, she told him everything, the text from Madison, coming to the bathroom alone, being surrounded and threatened, the phone destroyed, the door barricaded, hours of being trapped. As she spoke, one of the other officers took notes. The school administrator looked progressively more uncomfortable. The janitor looked like he might be sick. When she finished, Garrett turned to the other officers. "We need statements from all the students involved. Madison Pierce, Ashley." He looked at Temperance. "Ashley Turner, Brittany Rodriguez and Chelsea Morgan," Temperance supplied. "Those 4, Garrett continued. "We need to confiscate their phones. There might be evidence of planning in their messages. We need security footage from the hallways showing the group entering and exiting this bathroom. And we need to document everything in this room, the broken phone, the wedge that was used on the door, all of it." "This is a school matter," the administrator started weakly. "Perhaps it should be handled through—" "This is a criminal matter," Garrett interrupted, his voice leaving no room for argument, his cop voice in full force, backed by actual authority and badge. "False imprisonment is a crime. Destruction of property is a crime. This was premeditated, planned, and executed with malicious intent. The school had multiple opportunities to address this situation before it escalated to this point. You failed. Now this is a police matter." The administrator shut up, clearly realizing she had no ground to stand on. "Can I go home?" Temperance asked quietly. Garrett looked at her, his expression softening. "I need you to give a formal statement first. But yes, then I'll take you home. Mum and Dad are worried sick." Another pang of guilt. "They know?" "I called them when I couldn't reach you, and the school confirmed you were missing," Garrett said. "They're at the house waiting." The next 2 hours were a blur of official procedures. Temperance gave her statement to one of the other officers while Garrett paced nearby, clearly struggling to maintain professional distance. They photographed the bathroom, documented the wedge that had been used to barricade the door, retrieved and documented her broken phone. Then came the part Temperance had been both dreading and anticipating, confronting Madison and her friends. The 4 girls were brought to the school, along with their parents, for questioning. Temperance didn't have to see them. She was kept in a separate office. But she could hear Madison's mother's voice echoing down the hallway, loud and indignant. "This is outrageous! My daughter would never do something like this. That girl is obviously lying for attention." Then Garrett's voice, cold and professional. "Mrs. Pierce, we have testimony from your daughter's boyfriend confirming he placed the out-of-order sign at your daughter's request. We have the barricade device that matches ones your daughter posted on her Instagram months ago during a camping trip. We have text messages on your daughter's phone, which we confiscated with a warrant, discussing planning this incident. The evidence is substantial." Silence from Mrs. Pierce. The confrontation continued out of Temperance's earshot, but eventually Garrett came to get her. "The Pierce family's lawyer is here. The other parents, too. This is going to get messy, but we have everything we need. Come on, let's get you home." Walking through the school hallways with Garrett felt surreal. The building that had been a source of anxiety and fear for months now felt emptied of that power. Madison and her friends had finally overstepped, had finally left evidence that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. Consequences were coming. In Garrett's police cruiser, Temperance slumped in the passenger seat, exhaustion hitting her like a physical wave. The adrenaline that had kept her going was draining away, leaving her hollow and shaky. "You should have called me sooner," Garrett said as he drove, his voice gentle now rather than stern. "The moment they sent you that text, you should have called me." "I know," she said quietly. I don't know what I thought, that maybe they actually wanted to talk, that maybe it could end peacefully. I was stupid." "You weren't stupid," Garrett corrected. "You were hopeful." "That's not the same thing. But people like Madison don't stop on their own. They escalate until someone forces them to stop. I'm sorry you had to learn that lesson the hard way." They drove in silence for a few minutes. Then Garrett said, "This is going to be all over school by tomorrow. The arrest, the charges, all of it. How do you feel about that?" Temperance thought about it. Thought about walking into Roosevelt High on Monday, knowing everyone would be talking about her, about what happened, about Madison being arrested. It should have felt daunting, but instead it felt like freedom. "I feel okay about it," she said, "because this time I'm not the victim in the story. This time the bullies face consequences." Garrett glanced at her, a small smile touching his lips. "That's my sister." At home, their parents engulfed her in hugs and tears and relief. Her mother kept touching her face, as if confirming she was really there, really safe. Her father kept asking if she was hurt, if she needed anything, his hands clenching and unclenching with helpless anger at what she'd endured. "I'm okay," Temperance kept saying. "Really, I'm okay." But that night, alone in her room, the reality of what had happened hit her fully. She'd been trapped, helpless, at the mercy of people who wanted to hurt her, the powerlessness of it, the fear, the hours of not knowing when or if it would end. It all came crashing down. She cried for hours, muffling the sobs in her pillow so her parents wouldn't hear. Cried for the months of torment she'd endured. Cried for the friendship with Hollis that had been collateral damage in Madison's campaign. Cried for the girl she'd been before moving to Dallas, before Roosevelt High, before learning that sometimes people were cruel for no reason other than because they could be. Her phone, a replacement Garrett had given her, buzzed with a text. "Hollis, heard what happened. Are you okay? Can I call you?" She wiped her face and typed back, "Tomorrow." Too tired tonight. But thank you for checking. Okay, I'm here if you need to talk, about anything, at any time. She fell asleep with her phone clutched in her hand, exhausted and traumatized, but also, for the first time in months, feeling like maybe things could actually get better. The weekend passed in a strange combination of rest and anxiety. Garrett came over both days, updating them on the investigation. Madison, Ashley, Brittany and Chelsea had all been charged with false imprisonment and conspiracy. The janitor, Brittany's boyfriend, faced charges as an accomplice. Madison's parents had hired an expensive lawyer who was trying to argue it was a prank gone wrong, teenage foolishness rather than criminal behavior. It doesn't matter what they argue, Garrett told Temperance on Sunday afternoon. We have evidence. We have testimony. We have their own text messages planning it. They're going to face consequences, even if their lawyers manage to get the charges reduced. What kind of consequences? Temperance asked. Best case for them, plea deal with probation, community service, formal criminal records. Worst case, juvenile detention time, depending on how the DA decides to pursue it. Garrett's expression was grim satisfaction. Either way, their college applications just got a lot more complicated. Good, Temperance said, surprised by the vehemence in her own voice. Monday morning arrived too soon, and not soon enough. Temperance stood in front of her closet for a long time, trying to decide what to wear. Finally, she chose jeans and a simple sweater. Nothing flashy, nothing that drew attention, but also nothing that screamed victim. She was done being small. Garrett had offered to drive her to school, but she'd refused. I need to do this myself, she'd told him. Hollis was waiting for her in the parking lot when she arrived. He'd texted asking where she wanted to meet, and she'd suggested her usual spot. Seeing him leaning against his beat-up Honda, hands in his pockets, looking worried, it made something in her chest unclench slightly. Hey, he said when she got out of her car, how are you? Honestly? I don't know, she admitted, scared to go in there, but also ready to face it. For what it's worth, everyone's on your side this time, Hollis said. Madison and her crew arrested for trapping you in a bathroom? That's not something people can spin or excuse. Even students who didn't like you before are talking about how messed up that was. They walked into school together, and immediately Temperance felt the stares. But they were different from the mocking, judgmental stares she'd endured for months. These were curious, sympathetic, sometimes guilty. Students parted to let them through, some offering small nods or, hey, glad you're okay, as they passed. At her locker, her vandalized, graffitied locker that administration had never properly cleaned, a group of students she'd never spoken to were waiting. One girl stepped forward hesitantly. We wanted to say we're sorry, she said, for not helping. For not speaking up. We knew what Madison was doing to you, and we should have said something. We're sorry. Temperance was so shocked she couldn't speak for a moment. Finally, she managed, thank you. That means a lot. The group dispersed, but the girl lingered. There's a lot of us who feel that way. We're planning to give statements to the police about other things we witnessed, things that establish a pattern of harassment. If that helps. It helps, Temperance said quietly. First period was AP Literature, the class she shared with Hollis. Their teacher, Miss Warren, stopped her after class. I owe you an apology, Ms. Warren said quietly. I witnessed multiple incidents involving you and Madison's group. I should have intervened, should have reported it, should have done more than I did. I failed you as a teacher, and I'm sorry. Temperance didn't know what to say to that either. The apology was genuine, but it also came too late, after months of suffering that could have been prevented if even one adult had taken action. Thank you for saying that, she finally managed. By lunchtime, the full story had spread through the school. Details were confused in some retellings. Some students thought Temperance had been trapped overnight, others that there had been physical violence. But the core truth was clear. Madison Pierce and her friends had criminally targeted another student, and they were facing real consequences. Temperance and Hollis ate lunch in the cafeteria for the first time in months, sitting at their table by the windows. Other students nodded greetings as they passed. Some stopped to say they were glad she was okay. No one bothered them. No one mocked them. No one made them feel unwelcome. "This is weird," Temperance said, looking around the crowded cafeteria that suddenly felt less hostile. "Good weird or bad weird?" Hollis asked. "I don't know yet," she admitted. Tuesday brought a school assembly. Principal Morrison stood at the podium in the gymnasium, looking uncomfortable as she addressed the entire student body about bullying, harassment, and the school's failure to adequately address the situation. "We failed one of our students," she said bluntly. "Multiple staff members witnessed harassment and didn't intervene. Administration dismissed complaints without proper investigation. We prioritized protecting the school's reputation over protecting a student's well-being. That stops now." She outlined new policies: mandatory reporting for staff who witnessed bullying, anonymous reporting system for students, third-party investigation for any harassment claims involving families who donated to the school or had influence. It was all stuff that should have existed already, but better late than never. "I know many of you feel guilty for not helping Temperance Ashford when she needed it," Principal Morrison continued. "That guilt is appropriate, but turn it into action. Stand up for each other. Report what you see. Don't be a bystander. You have more power than you think to change the culture of this school." After the assembly, students Temperance had never spoken to approached her in the hallways. Some apologized for not helping. Some shared their own stories of being bullied and how they wished someone had stood up for them. Some just offered friendship, recognizing that she'd been isolated for too long. It was overwhelming in a good way. Temperance had spent months invisible or reviled. Now she was suddenly visible and supported. It should have felt like victory, but mostly it felt exhausting. Wednesday, Temperance had to testify before a grand jury. Garrett drove her to the courthouse, and she told her story again: the months of harassment, the escalation, the entrapment. Madison's lawyer tried to paint it as a misunderstanding, teenage drama blown out of proportion. But the prosecutor had evidence: text messages, witness statements, the physical evidence from the bathroom. The grand jury returned indictments on all charges. "What happens now?" Temperance asked Garrett afterward. "Now there's a trial, or more likely, their lawyers negotiate plea deals," he explained. "Given their ages and lack of prior records, they probably won't do jail time, but they'll have criminal records. They'll have to do community service. They might have to transfer schools, and their parents are facing civil liability. Your family could sue for emotional distress, therapy costs, all of it." "I just want them to leave me alone," Temperance said tiredly. "They will," Garrett promised. "Court orders will make sure of it. Restraining orders, mandatory distance requirements. They won't be able to come near you." Thursday, Madison's parents withdrew her from Roosevelt High. The official story was that she'd be finishing her education at a private school across town, but everyone knew the truth. She'd been expelled in everything but name, pushed out before the school had to take the PR hit of an official expulsion. Ashley, Brittany, and Chelsea remained at Roosevelt High, but were completely ostracized. Students who'd once orbited around Madison now avoided her former friends like they were contaminated. The social hierarchy that Madison had ruled so completely collapsed almost overnight. Temperance should have felt satisfaction at their fall from grace, but mostly she just felt tired. Revenge was supposed to feel good, but this didn't feel like revenge. It felt like justice, and justice was cold and procedural and exhausting. Friday, exactly 1 week after being trapped in the bathroom, Temperance sat in her car after school with Hollis. "How are you really doing?" he asked. "And don't say fine, because I can tell you're not." She was quiet for a long moment, trying to find words for the complicated mess of emotions. "I don't feel like I won," she said finally. "I thought I would. I thought when they faced consequences, when everyone knew what they did, I'd feel vindicated. But I just feel hollow." "That's normal," Hollis said gently. "You went through months of trauma. 1 week of justice doesn't erase that. You're probably going to need therapy." "My parents already found me a therapist," Temperance admitted. "First appointment is Monday." "Good," Hollis said. "And for what it's worth, I'm proud of you. For surviving all of it, for speaking up, for being brave enough to testify." "I didn't feel brave," she said. "Brave people never do," Hollis replied. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the parking lot gradually empty as students left for the weekend. Finally, Hollis said, "So, now that you're not fighting for survival every day, want to go see a movie this weekend? Like, as a date?" Temperance looked at him, at his hopeful expression and nervous smile. Something warm unfurled in her chest. A feeling she'd forgotten was possible. Hope. "Yes," she said. "I'd like that." The following weeks brought a gradual return to normalcy, or as close to normal as possible after everything that had happened. Madison's trial resulted in a plea deal. 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, mandatory anger management counseling, and a criminal record that would follow her into adulthood. Ashley, Brittany, and Chelsea received similar sentences as co-defendants. The janitor, Brittany's boyfriend, lost his job and faced his own charges for being an accomplice. He pleaded guilty in exchange for a lighter sentence, but the betrayal of his position of trust meant he'd never work in a school again. Roosevelt High underwent significant changes. Multiple staff members were reprimanded for failing to report witnessed bullying. The anonymous reporting system was implemented with actual follow-through. Complaints were now investigated by third parties rather than school administration. Students who'd been silent bystanders began speaking up when they saw harassment. Temperance became something of an unexpected symbol for the changes. Students who'd ignored her before now greeted her in the hallways. Some sought her out to share their own stories of bullying and thank her for speaking up. Teachers went out of their way to check in with her, to make sure she felt supported. It was a lot of attention for someone who'd spent most of her life trying to be invisible. But Temperance found she didn't mind as much as she expected. The attention came from a place of respect rather than mockery, solidarity rather than judgment. Her relationship with Hollis deepened naturally. They went on their movie date, which turned into regular dates, which turned into an official relationship. He made her laugh when she needed to laugh, listened when she needed to talk, gave her space when she needed to be alone. His presence was steady and reliable in a way that helped ground her when the trauma threatened to overwhelm. Therapy helped too. Her therapist, Dr. Kim, specialized in trauma and helped Temperance process the months of harassment and the terror of being trapped. They talked about hypervigilance, about trust issues, about the complicated reality that justice had been served, but the emotional damage remained. "Healing isn't linear," Dr. Kim told her during one session. "Some days you'll feel strong and okay. Other days you'll feel like you're right back in that moment of helplessness. Both are normal. Both are part of the process." Winter break came, bringing 2 weeks of respite from school. Temperance spent it with her family and Hollis, trying to remember what it felt like to exist without constant anxiety. Christmas was quiet and peaceful, exactly what she needed. The spring semester started in January, and Temperance returned to Roosevelt High with cautious optimism. Madison was gone, her friends were pariahs, and the school culture had genuinely shifted. Students were quicker to call out harassment, teachers were more attentive to social dynamics, and administration actually followed through on investigations. But Madison's absence didn't erase the impact of her cruelty. Temperance still had moments of intense anxiety walking into school, still jumped when someone approached her unexpectedly, still had nightmares about being trapped in small spaces. The trauma was a persistent echo that therapy helped quiet but couldn't completely silence. In February, Ashley approached Temperance in the library. Temperance tensed instinctively, but Ashley kept her distance, her body language defensive rather than aggressive. "I know I'm not supposed to come near you," Ashley said quietly, "and I'll leave if you want me to. But I wanted to say I'm sorry. For real, not because my lawyer told me to. What we did to you was unforgivable. I can't take it back, but I am genuinely sorry." Temperance studied her former tormentor. Ashley looked different, smaller somehow, less polished. The expensive clothes and perfect makeup were gone, replaced by plain jeans and a sweatshirt. She'd lost the mean girl veneer that had made her one of Madison's most loyal followers. "Why did you do it?" Temperance asked, not angry, just genuinely curious. "You didn't know me. I never did anything to you. Why did you participate in making my life hell?" Ashley was quiet for a long moment. "Because Madison was popular and I wasn't, not really. Being her friend meant I mattered, meant I had status, and when you're desperate to belong, you'll do terrible things to maintain that position." She looked down at her hands. "I know that's not an excuse. Nothing excuses what we did, but that's the truth. I was a coward who went along with cruelty because I was too weak to stand up to it." "Thank you for being honest," Temperance said carefully. "I appreciate the apology, but I'm not ready to forgive. Maybe someday, but not yet." "That's fair," Ashley said. She turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, you were braver than all of us combined. You survived everything we threw at you and came out stronger. I respect that, even if I have no right to say so." She left before Temperance could respond. Hollis, who'd been watching from across the library, came over. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," Temperance said, surprised to find she meant it. "Yeah, I am." By March, Temperance found herself in an unexpected role. Advocate for other bullying victims. Students who were being harassed came to her for advice, for support, for someone who understood what they were going through. She helped them document incidents, encouraged them to report to the new anonymous system, accompanied them to meetings with administration when they needed support. "You're good at this," Hollis observed one afternoon after Temperance had spent her lunch period helping a freshman girl deal with a harassment situation. "Have you thought about doing it professionally, like becoming a counselor or advocate?" "Maybe," Temperance said thoughtfully. She'd been planning to study creative writing in college, but the idea of helping others navigate what she'd survived was appealing. "I have time to decide." April brought the civil lawsuit. Temperance's parents had decided to sue Madison's family along with the school district for negligence and emotional distress. The lawsuit alleged that the school had failed in its duty of care, and that Madison's parents had failed to supervise their daughter despite clear warning signs of bullying behavior. Temperance had mixed feelings about the lawsuit. Part of her wanted to just move on, to leave it all in the past. But another part recognized that financial consequences might be the only thing that made wealthy families like the Pierces actually change their behavior. And the school district needed to understand that protecting their reputation wasn't worth sacrificing student safety. The case was settled out of court in May. The terms were confidential, but Temperance knew her parents had received enough to cover all her therapy costs, plus damages for emotional distress. Plus, her college fund was now fully funded. The school district had agreed to additional anti-bullying reforms and mandatory training for all staff. It felt like closure, or as close to closure as she was likely to get. June brought the end of the school year. Temperance walked across the stage at graduation. She'd somehow maintained decent enough grades despite everything to graduate with her class. Garrett was in the audience, along with her parents and Hollis's family. She saw him stand and cheer when her name was called, his pride visible even from a distance. After the ceremony, surrounded by her family, Temperance felt an unexpected wave of emotion. She'd survived. She'd endured months of systematic harassment, had been trapped and terrorized, had fought back and won. She'd made it to the other side. "Proud of you, Temp," Garrett said, pulling her into a hug. "You're tougher than you know." "I learned from the best," she said. That summer before college was peaceful, in a way Temperance had forgotten was possible. She worked part-time at a bookstore, spent time with Hollis, went to therapy, and slowly started to feel like herself again. The hyper-vigilance gradually decreased. The nightmares became less frequent. The weight of constant anxiety lifted incrementally. She and Hollis had decided to attend different colleges. He was going to art school in California. She'd chosen a liberal arts college in Colorado. It was bittersweet, but they'd agreed to try long distance and see what happened. "You saved me, you know," Hollis said one evening, as they sat on her parents' back porch watching the sunset. "This whole year, having someone else who understood what it was like to be targeted, I wouldn't have made it through without you." "We saved each other," Temperance corrected gently. 1 week before leaving for college, Temperance went back to Roosevelt High. The building was empty during summer break, but she'd gotten permission to visit from the new principal who'd replaced Principal Morrison, who'd resigned under pressure in March. She walked through the empty hallways, her footsteps echoing. Past her old locker, now clean and painted. Walked through the cafeteria where Madison had dumped the milkshake on her. Stood outside the second-floor bathroom where she'd been trapped. The building held no power over her anymore. The spaces that had been sites of trauma were just rooms now, just hallways, just a school. She'd taken back her power from them. In the parking lot, she found Garrett waiting by his car. She'd texted him that she was coming here, and he'd shown up without being asked, because that's what big brothers did. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Free," she said, and meant it. College was a fresh start in the best possible way. Temperance had chosen a small school where she didn't know anyone, where no one knew her story, where she could just be herself without the weight of being that girl who was bullied. She made friends easily, surprised to discover that without the trauma of Roosevelt High hanging over her, she was actually quite social. She joined the campus literary magazine, started a peer support group for bullying survivors, and eventually declared a double major in psychology and creative writing. She stayed in touch with Hollis. The long-distance relationship was hard, but manageable, and they visited each other during breaks. Their relationship had been forged in shared trauma, but it evolved into something healthier and more balanced as they both healed and grew. She stayed in touch with Garrett, too, calling him every Sunday, visiting during holidays. Their relationship had always been close, but the events of her final year of high school had deepened their bond. He'd been there when she needed him most, had fought for her when she couldn't fight for herself. She'd never forget that. 2 years into college, Temperance started writing about her experience. What began as a therapeutic exercise became an essay, which became a long-form article, which eventually became a book proposal. She wrote honestly about the harassment, the fear, the feeling of powerlessness, but also about survival, resistance, and recovery. The book was published when she was 23, a year after graduating college. When Silence Breaks, a story of bullying, survival, and justice, became something of a phenomenon. It was adopted by schools as required reading. Temperance was invited to speak at education conferences, at anti-bullying events, at schools struggling with their own harassment problems. She never particularly wanted to be a public figure, but she recognized the value of her story. If sharing what she'd endured could help even one person feel less alone, could inspire even one bystander to speak up, could push even one school to take bullying more seriously, it was worth the discomfort of exposure. "You've turned something terrible into something meaningful," Dr. Kim told her during one of their sessions. Temperance still saw her therapist occasionally, checking in when old trauma responses surfaced, or when the stress of public speaking about her experiences became overwhelming. That's incredibly powerful. On the 5-year anniversary of being trapped in that bathroom, Temperance did something she'd been considering for a while. She reached out to Ashley, whose contact information she'd gotten through a mutual acquaintance. They met at a coffee shop, neutral territory. Ashley had changed dramatically in 5 years. She'd gone to community college, transferred to a 4-year school, majored in social work. She was working at a youth center now, helping at-risk teenagers. "I read your book," Ashley said after they'd gotten their drinks and found a table. "It was hard to read, seeing what we did to you from your perspective, but I needed to read it, needed to really understand the damage we caused." "I'm glad you read it," Temperance said carefully, "and I'm glad you're using your experience to help others now." "It's the least I can do," Ashley said. "I can't take back what happened, but I can try to prevent it from happening to someone else. I work specifically with kids who exhibit bullying behavior, trying to intervene before they cause the kind of damage we caused you." They talked for 2 hours, a conversation that was sometimes painful, but ultimately healing for both of them. Temperance still wasn't sure if she fully forgave Ashley, but she could see that Ashley had genuinely changed, had done real work to become a better person. "I don't think we'll ever be friends," Temperance said honestly as they prepared to leave. "But I do believe you're sorry, and I believe you're trying to be better. That matters." "Thank you," Ashley said quietly, "for giving me a chance to apologize properly, for writing about what happened so honestly, for surviving." They parted amicably, and Temperance felt another piece of the trauma release its hold. Years passed. Temperance continued her advocacy work while also pursuing her own healing and growth. She became a licensed therapist specializing in trauma, particularly bullying and harassment. She married Hollis when they were 28, a small ceremony with family and close friends. Garrett walked her down the aisle, and she cried happy tears for the first time in years. She never forgot what happened at Roosevelt High. The trauma became integrated into her story rather than defining it. She carried scars, both visible and invisible, but they didn't control her anymore. On days when she worked with clients who'd survived their own harassment and trauma, she thought about that 17-year-old girl trapped in a bathroom, terrified and alone. She thought about how that girl had survived, had fought back, had refused to be broken. She'd turned that suffering into strength, that pain into purpose. And sometimes, when working with a particularly difficult case or speaking to a room full of educators about the realities of bullying, she'd think about the moment Garrett opened that bathroom door, the moment she'd been found, been saved, been vindicated, the moment everything started to change. She'd learned that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was ask for help. That surviving wasn't about being strong enough to endure alone, but about being wise enough to accept support when it was offered. That justice mattered, consequences mattered, and standing up for yourself, even when it was terrifying, mattered. Temperance Ashford had been a victim once, but she'd refused to stay a victim. She'd become a survivor, an advocate, a therapist, a writer. She'd turned her worst experiences into her life's work, helping others navigate the darkness she'd once been lost in. And every time she helped a bullying victim find their voice, every time she saw a bystander choose to intervene, every time she witnessed a bully face consequences instead of being enabled, she thought, "This is why I survived. This is what it was all for." The 17-year-old girl trapped in that bathroom would have struggled to believe it. But that girl had been stronger than she knew, strong enough to survive, strong enough to heal, strong enough to ensure that what she'd endured would matter, would mean something, would help prevent others from suffering the same way. That was true victory, not revenge, but transformation, not breaking her tormentors, but building something better from the broken pieces of her own experience, taking the worst moments of her life and using them to create light for others still trapped in darkness. Temperance Ashford had found her voice when silence broke, and she would spend the rest of her life making sure others found theirs too.